Carolyn Dube here. What's the play for today? Well, today I'm playing with a butterfly book. This is a three-dimensional butterfly book with all sorts of areas for journaling and writing and just absolute fun. But I have to tell you, along the way, there was an oops or two or three. Now, usually with an oops, I'm really happy with how it turns out, and that's the case here. But one of these oopsies had a little extra surprise for me in that it got me to use a tool that I absolutely avoid at all costs when I'm in the studio. The kind of thing that I'll pretty much do anything to avoid using this tool because I have some kind of, anxiety, fear, who knows what with it, but it is one of my most dreaded tools in all of the studio. And thanks to an oops, I actually got it out and used it. And I survived. I lived. Of course, it's not like it was anything dangerous. You'll see that it is definitely not a dangerous tool for most people. Well, almost anybody. But anyway, I'm starting to babble. Enough of my talking and head in and see how I actually built this butterfly book. So here are the stencils from Maria Maguire that I'm going to use to build a butterfly book. And I've got these big pieces of paper that I created at some point using spray inks and paint and stamps and who knows what. That's what I'm going to use to stencil on. So I'm going to stencil this using a cosmetic sponge and just black acrylic paint. As I'm doing this, if I want it to be absolutely perfect, I should go in an up and down motion and use a small amount of paint. You want it to be fairly dry as you're doing it if you want the crisp, perfect image. I, however, am not attached to a crisp, perfect image, so I like to do things the fast way, which means using a little more paint so it might run under places here and there. And it means going sometimes side to side. You'll notice that I don't really pounce up and down a whole lot. I start that way. I have the best of intentions of doing that, but then I just immediately go into going side to side. Not going to bother me if something isn't perfect on this. This is a hand-drawn stencil from Maria Maguire, and it absolutely lends itself perfectly to imperfect stenciling, in my opinion, because it just adds more of that hand-done touch to it. As I'm finishing this up, one of the things I'm going to do is set this aside. I'm not going to clean it, and I know that's going to be a shock to some, but I'm not going to clean it. What I need to do is just have that black paint dry because I'm going to need to do the reverse stenciling of it, and rather than worry about stuff, I'm just going to let it go off to the side and dry while I stencil in the next butterfly. And then when I'm done with each of these colors, I'm going to set that aside because what I want is for the stencil to dry for this one also, because I'm going to be using the reverse of it when I stencil the other side of the book for this, just like I'm doing with the green. So I'm about finished with the blue. Now I'm going to go back to the green. This stencil is completely dry, and what I want to do is make sure I've got the reverse. So that was the side with all the black on it that I just did, and I'm going to put that side face down because what I want is the mirror image of this. Now I sped up the camera to like supersonic speed here as I'm stenciling. I'm going to go through and do this so that I've got the reverse image of it or the mirror image of it for the large butterfly, and I'm also going to do it for the purple and the blue, the smaller butterflies. I'm not going to show you all those because basically you've now watched me stencil a couple of times here. You probably don't really need to see it any more than that. But just know that that's allowing the time for the stencil to dry so that when I flip it over, none of the black paint transfers that I don't want to. Well, now it's time to cut out the butterflies. I've cut them out from the larger sheets just so it's easier to handle. And sometimes I'll even trim off to a sort of a sloppy cut just to trim off the big pieces of paper so I can get in and then do more of the fussy cutting. Now, to me, this is fussy cutting because I don't really do a lot of cutting very carefully. This is probably not fussy cutting to people that are used to being very precise, but for the imprecise, this is fussy cutting. Do I have to follow everything super precisely around the edge? Absolutely not. We absolutely can do it however fits us best. Each person do it their way. This is as fussy about it as I want to get. If you want to be super precise about it, absolutely go for it because there are some beautiful lines and edges around this thing to do that with. That, however, is not my style. Kind of like that's why the antennas disappeared because I'm not cutting around those things. Those were just way too finely detailed for me, so I've cut the antennas off those little buggers. And you can keep them or you can get rid of them. It's totally up to you because when you make this, it will be your butterfly book. And once I've got the big butterflies cut out, I'm also going to cut out the little butterflies. You probably don't need to watch me actually cut out all 6 of these butterflies. You've got the gist of how scissors work and how you cut. And yes, I am taking the antenna off of all of the butterflies because I don't want to mess with it, and I can do that. Well, here's what they look like all cut out. Colorful, fun, playful, but now I want some pages for inside this book. I wanted some lined pages on this for writing or journaling, so I'm using this pad of paper I bought at the office supply store, and I love this one because it had white paper with black lines instead of the usual like yellow paper with the blue lines. And I'm going to use the very fancy tool, the pencil, to trace. Now, each one of these butterflies, one is the front and one is the back, and they'll actually be facing both of them out, so it's color on the outsides of the book. So I'm going to grab one of the butterflies and use that as the pattern or template that I'm going to trace. This butterfly, by the way, is on a slightly heavier weight paper. It's Canson mixed media paper, so it's nice and sturdy for what I'm doing here. I've got my butterfly, and I've got the far edge of him, the body of the butterfly, and I'm going to trace around the head and the wing. Now, the reason why I'm using a pencil is because I slip all the time, and if I end up making a mark onto the green like I just did there, I can just erase it and nobody will ever know. So that's why I'm using a pencil for this, but you could use a pen, you could use anything you wanted. I'm going to pull this away because it's traced, but I'm going to draw a line here because I don't care about the little tail part and I don't care about the head. I'm not going to use those parts, so I don't need to cut them out. This way is also great because if you've got a butterfly that's larger than your piece of paper, this is a great way to make normal size paper fit something that's larger. So I'm going to take my scissors, and when I cut this out, you'll notice that I'm cutting inside the lines, and I'm not following it very precisely. I just need to stay within those lines. Now you're thinking, well, Carolyn, you're just making sure that you don't have that pencil marking on there, right? And the answer is yes and more. I'm also making sure that my pages are smaller than the cover of my book. This is my guaranteed way because I traced it and I'm just cutting on the inside of those lines, and that way it's bound to fit there. Now these scraps of paper here with that cool pattern down there and that scroll work, I'm not wasting that. I am going to cut that off and save it. It can totally be used in some other project. And this piece of paper, I've got plenty of those lines right there and lots of ways I can use that as a piece of journaling paper somewhere. So I'm going to set that aside and save it. So I've got one set of the wing paper together, and I'm now going to position it onto the final piece that it's going to go with. That way I'm sure everything lines up. So I'm going to take the back of it, and I'm just going to make sure that my papers line up there and set it aside. And I'm going to go through and do this exact same process with the other side of the butterfly. Same kind of deal. The body is just right on there to the edge, and I'm going to trace around. I'm going to trace the head, but I'm going to put a big X through the head because I'm going to cut it off. Well, that really sounds bad. But anyway, you know what I mean. I'm not going to cut out the head. I'm going to trace around the wings of the butterfly and the body, go through the same process again. Now with this, I'm actually cutting 3 pieces of paper at the same time. I could trace it each time and cut it, but that just seems like more work than what it has to be. So that's why I'm just cutting all 3 of them at the same time. Now these lines that I'm drawing here and those X's, you think that's for you to illustrate to you, but actually that's for me because I'll forget as I'm doing other things and I don't want to cut out more stuff than I have to. Again, just staying way inside those lines, that way my pages are smaller than my cover. And hey, by the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, I would love it if you hit that thumbs up button. And of course, if you want to see more of my videos, hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss when I have a new video out. And I've got more stuff over on my blog at acolorfuljourney.com. So if you want more play after this, head on over there. I have got a free newsletter that includes some free downloadable treats and goodies when you sign up, as well as there's always a treat or goodie in every single newsletter that I send out. Well, now back to this butterfly here. You can see how the papers overlap there in the middle. That's exactly what I wanted because that's where I'm going to be attaching them, is right there. I am going to hold them in place with some big old binder clips. Paper clips would be a lot more efficient, but I've got these right here, so I'm just going to put some big old binder clips on there as I line up the pages, making sure they're where I want them to be. And people aren't going to see that center part either, so don't worry about that. What you really just want is the paper right there in the middle because that's where it's all going to get attached or held together. That's going to be the strength of it, keeping those pages as one item. And there's what it would look like with the cover on top of it. Well, now I'm going to go through the same process that I did for the green butterfly for the other 2. They're smaller, so I can actually get all sorts of wings on a single piece of paper. And I'm going to have to slide that over a little bit. That way the purple one can get on there Probably if I'd thought really carefully about this before I started, I would have thought more about that. But you know what? We're just going to call that an oops. And really, it's not, I don't even know if I'd classify it as an oops because they all still fit on this piece of paper. That way I'm getting the maximum use out of supplies that I have. And yes, you bet I had to draw those X's on there because I'm definitely not going to remember what I'm doing without doing that for myself. So the first bit that I cut out, you'll notice that I sort of cut them off the larger piece of paper. That way it's just easier for me to handle. And I'm going to tell you right now, there is a big oops that started right now at this moment. And it most definitely is an outstanding opportunity presenting suddenly. I don't know if you can see what that oops is, but you'll see it by the end exactly what's happening. So, like I said, same process that what I did for the green butterfly, I'm doing it for the other two. As I cut out the different pages, I'm lining them up and then putting the cover on top of them. Once I've got the binder clips on them, that way the pages stay where I want them to stay, then I'm ready to start stacking my butterflies on top of each other because it's going to become this graduated book of butterflies. So I just need to get all of them to stay together with the little clips, and then I'm ready to stack them. So I've got the big one, then I'm going to put the purple one, and then the smallest one. Now it's time to attach them all together and head over to the sewing machine. All right, so here I am over at the sewing machine. Now I had those big old binder clips and such. I had to move those because it was impossible to get this underneath the foot here to actually sew it on the machine. Probably something like a paper clip, which would have held them just as well, would be much more practical. But here's the deal. I can't find any of my paper clips, so I don't know what happened to them. I'll blame the teenagers. Yeah, they took them all, but most likely I just misplaced them. So anyway, I just slid those binder clips over to the far ends of the wings. That way it would fit under here. Now I'm going to tell you right now, if you have any questions about sewing machines, you do not want to ask those of me because I don't really have a clue what I'm doing here. I just know that you put the needle in and you sew straight up and down right where the papers are underneath there. The machine that I have pretty much just kind of goes, do this now, hit this button now. I don't really understand it. I actually got this one because it simply says automatic tension and I never have to adjust that. So as I go and put this on here, and you'll notice too, after I sew it one way through, then it's me going, now where's the reverse button? Where's the back button? And I finally find it and then struggle with it. And I'm kind of also trying to wiggle the paper over just a fraction so that I'm not actually sewing over the exact same spot twice, because that's really hard on paper. When you sew over the exact same spot twice, it's more likely actually to perforate and rip there. And we don't want that after this work. So here's what my butterfly looks like all sewn together. I'm super excited. I'm super happy. It's just the way I wanted it to go. Things are feeling good here. And then the oops is about to be revealed. Now, what I'm going to do is I realized, okay, here's a little oops before the big oops, is I never sealed the stitches or locked the stitches. Sorry, that's what sewing people call it, locking it. So I'm just going to put a little bit of tacky glue back there. It'll dry clear and nobody will know that it's there, and that way it'll make sure that the stitching never comes out. But then as I'm looking at this, because the pages, right, we have these lined pages, here's where the oops happens. I have these butterflies on backwards, so you can't see the black lines on the paper. Well, I mean, you can kind of see it through it, but clearly the paper's in there backwards. Oops. Outstanding opportunity presenting suddenly. Gotta tell you, at first I was like, man, how did I do that? Like, I should have realized that. And then I realized, no, this is absolutely an oops. There is an opportunity here. And I'm even going to work with a tool that scares me no end. So what's the tool that scares me that I seem to have a real problem using? It's a ruler. Some people have creativity scars. I seem to have had ruler scars at some point, and I just don't like using them. But the black lines that were already on that paper were kind of showing through, so I'm using those as a guide as I take just a plain old pen and just draw those lines back in. I wanted them to be straight, so that's where the ruler is really handy. So I'm not really using it to measure. I'm using it more as a straight edge. So that makes it, well, a little bit better in my book. But I still am touching the ruler, so yeah, it's one of those perks of the oops is it gets me using a tool that I don't use that often. And as I looked at that, it was fine, but not fine enough. I wanted some color there. So I grabbed a colored pencil and I thought I can do this with a colored pencil and get a more colorful look to it. Thinking this is great, but sometimes one oops leads to another oops. And after I got the one page done with just the black pen and I did the one with the colored pencil, I'm like, wow, I really don't like the one with just the black anymore. I want color on that one. So I thought, hey, I'll just go back and put color on top of that one. Well, the oops is that I really love how that looks with the black line under it and then the colored pencil over it. So, end of the world that they aren't the same? Absolutely not. It's totally an oops, an outstanding opportunity presenting suddenly yet again. I make a lot of oopsies here and there. So the first one has the black lines, the second one doesn't, and the third one will. So it's now just alternating. There's some variety to it. That's how I'm going to handle it. So I've gone over and finished up that page, and I'm going to work over on the other side and just repeat that same pattern. So on the first page, it's going to be black lines and colored pencil. On the second page, it's going to be just colored pencil. And then on the third page in it, it will be black line and colored pencil. That way it's the same on both sides of the butterfly. Well, here I am working on the middle-sized butterfly. I'm drawing the black lines on, and I gotta tell you by this point, my patience level is, this is kind of getting repetitive for me. So I've totally ditched the ruler when it comes to drawing the colored pencil lines on because it's faster to do it without it, and it's straight enough for me. So I've got orange lines on the middle butterfly, so it just adds a little more color pop to it because you know me, I gotta try and work the entire rainbow into whatever it is I'm doing. And for the middle butterfly, I'm actually going to do all of the pages with the black line and the orange colored pencil, simply because I like that look more than the one with just the colored pencil on it. Well, here it is all finished. I love that the pages kind of pop up. It almost looks like a butterfly sort of fluttering by, which was really what I was hoping for with this. And then the colors on the pages, that oops, really turned out to be an awesome opportunity because I love that little pop of color in there. And I'm pretty darn sure that if it hadn't been for that oops, I never would have taken the time to draw those colored lines in there because, well, with my patience level, it takes something like an oops to get me to do that. Well, thanks for joining me for today's play. If you'd like to play some more, head on over to my blog at A Colorful Journey and check out my free workshop called Permission to Play. Thank you for being a part of this colorful journey.